and it is my pleasure to introduce the next panel. And we're going to continue this conversation around K-12 education with our next panel. And to have that conversation, I want to call up my fellow panelists and our moderator, Dale Winkler, the Senior Vice President of the Southern Regional Education Board. Welcome, everybody.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Equipping our K-12 students with the skills and knowledge to be successful throughout their professional journey is integral to building a resilient workforce of the future, as we've already heard this morning. This, of course, includes being prepared for opportunities in growing industries and high-demand fields. With the release of the Governor's High Demand Career Initiative list, it is essential that students, families, teachers, and counselors have the information and tools to effectively move the workforce of tomorrow into these roles. To discuss how to best capitalize on these opportunities, we have, you've already met her, Dana Rickman, President and CEO of Georgia Partnership for Excellence in Education, and Irene Munn, Consultant with the Governor's Office of Student Achievement. And I will move over here and we'll begin our discussion. Thank you, ladies, for being here this morning. Looking forward to this discussion. We're going to start with you, Irene. We've already heard a little bit about the high demand list that has been developed and the great work that has been happening in the state of Georgia, but we want to go a little more detail of that. Can you just share us a little bit about the work of GOSA and the high demand list that's recently come out and the initiatives related to that?
I sure can, and thank you so much for allowing me to be here. I'm a fill-in on your program. It says Jackie Lunston, who is with the Governor's Office of Student Achievement. She was not able to join us today, so I got the notice yesterday to be here. And then also, let me go ahead and give apologies for Superintendent Woods. He's been called into a state board meeting, I believe, and is not able to join us. But I am thankful that we're going to get to have this discussion today as it relates to what Governor Kemp is doing in really response to a lot of different people and work that around what he is now calling the top state for talent. And I hope Chris and you, Dana, know that at least 3 to 4 years ago, he was actually listening and reading all of your reports that you were putting out. And over the last 2 years, he has really began acting in response to all of the things that you guys have been talking about. And I hope everybody in this audience very much can see very, very tangible things that are happening right now at the state level that Governor Kemp is leading on that will make a difference in that North Star goal of getting to 65% with some form of post-secondary education. I'm going to get to your question in just a second, but I really do need to give a big shout out to the first thing that Governor Kemp did when Stuart Countess was sitting next to him, I believe, 2 years ago at the summit, the Governor's Workforce Summit. And I think he turned to you, Stuart, if I'm correct, and said, guess what? You're going to be the chair of the State Workforce Board. And he said yes. And the work that we're about to talk about, the high demand career list, was approved on December 16th by the State Workforce Board. The other shout out that I really have to make is the staff people that worked really, really, really hard in creating the data, analyzing the data in order to help and create what is the high demand career list. And Jaya Krishman is here today, and also David Evans. They work on the GOSA staff and Georgia Awards. And then TCSG's workforce staff, Damon and Stephen, these data people really, really supported the efforts. And none of the work that you see on the high demand career list should be of any surprise to people that analyze and look at, like CAS data, as well as Department of Labor Bureau of Statistics. None of it should be a surprise. But what the governor has done is finally say, we need one list. And obviously, honestly, that was a response to the Georgia General Assembly also saying, we need one list. And then it was the State Workforce Board and Stewart's guidance. We really want data to drive that decision making. So I hope that everybody will make sure they've seen that list. Nothing on that list is going to be surprising. Chris did a good job talking about how many different jobs are out there. We have a whole lot of very good high demand jobs. But to Dana's point around the importance, it's not just high demand. It's high demand, high wage, and high skill. When you look at the rubric that was created to flesh out where we are, and we went from 797 SOC codes, and if David and Jaya were up here, they would explain what a SOC code is, but I think you guys know that, down to 242 different standard occupation codes that are truly driving the demand in the industries across our state. That covers every career pathway that is at the K-12 level. Every single one has a high demand, high wage, high skill opportunity. And you can look at the rubric that got to that, but the next challenge as it relates to the State Workforce Board that they have asked staff to begin looking at is what, again, utilizing data, what are the targeted priorities that then help the General Assembly and the governor put more resources towards that. There's no doubt that healthcare is at the top of that list. There are 19 SOC codes underneath the healthcare space. They range from every different type of job. But again, when you think about what Dana just presented around how do we align, where are the 2+2 arrangements? Where are the articulations? Where's the funding going to go to support these? Where's the supply and demand gaps? That is all being looked at. And one last thing that everybody needs to understand, Governor Kemp put forward what he calls the governor's education and workforce strategy team. That is every single education entity meets together monthly. There's some folks in this room that come together, and it's the Department of Education, Technical College System of Georgia, University System of Georgia, Georgia Student Finance, the Governor's Office of Student Achievement, and who am I missing? I think that's...
we have Workforce Georgia.
Thank you. Workforce Georgia is there, as well as SREB is in the room helping us too. So the collaborative that's going on is really, really listening to what everybody in this room has been reporting. And I hope that, again, you guys stay tuned. And what I like about this is the opportunity is alive and well right now for our employer partners to come to the table with Governor Kemp and really begin doing those targeted things that Dana talked about.
Well, at SREB, we are a 16-state educational compact, and we've been very lucky over the past 2 years that Governor Kemp has served as the chair of our board. And so in December of this past year, he announced a commission to bring together leaders from all 16 states and to look at how we can improve education pathways and lead to valuable credentials. And this commission is going to study a lot of the work that you're doing here in Georgia. Really, it was the impetus, House Bill 982, for this commission, because many of the states across the South are doing the same thing. How do we identify those priority occupations and put our resources into the development of pathways and the stack of credentials that are related to those occupations? And so we appreciate the work of this workforce strategy team, because that's informing us at SREB as we work with other states and see how that they are doing that as well. And so more to come as we move towards the summer, as we come out with some recommendations around the criteria, building those rubrics for how you identify those occupation lists, then what are the essential elements that need to be in place to build out those pathways, and then how do we truly identify the credentials that are valued by our business and industry, and how do we build them into the pipeline from our secondary programs through our post-secondary institution and our workforce training programs. So.
Yeah, and for sure, we really benefited from SREB's work and coming up with a rubric. what we did, we started this January of last year when Governor Kemp introduced the legislation. We're pretty confident when the governor introduces a bill, it's going to pass. So we began that work. Who was the first people that we called? Daniela, as well as the Metro Chamber, to come in. How have you guys been looking at this data? And then we give a call to SREB. What states have already done this well? Alabama was a great example to us to take a look at, and honestly, South Carolina too. So we had some real lessons learned from what they did, and of course, Georgia always does things better, right? I do believe what we have done is better than what we're doing, but we have an opportunity moving forward with y'all's leadership in really continuing to think about the governance and strategy and the alignment of everything that's happening at the state level to then flow down to really, and honestly, let's go back to K-12, starting at the K-12 level where you have a whole lot of independent decision makers at the level into a post-secondary partners that they're independent decision makers. And House Bill 982 very clearly says this list at a state level as well as a regional level. And if anybody goes and looks at that list, y'all, please look at your region. Please look at your region. And again, nothing should be surprising. But the important thing is that you two are informed by the list, the word used in House Bill 982, and then you begin aligning at that real boots on the ground level to get folks seamlessly into these identified high demand jobs.
Dana, you shared about the Partnerships Ed Quest effort earlier in the program and the North Star of ensuring 65% of Georgia adults have post-secondary credential. In your recent release of the Top 10 Issues publication, you dig deeper into the importance of employability. What is top of mind for your organization when considering opportunities to increase employability beginning in K-12 classrooms?
Yeah, there is a lot to unpack in what you guys were describing needs to be done. And I think as we think about implications for the K-12 system, they are very large. But I think it comes at a time where those implications are relevant and need to be discussed. Even if you weren't doing this, again, I go back to Chris's opening talk where we talked about we need a different way to think about school. In schooling, K-12, post-second, all of it needs to look different because things have changed since we were, Laura Ingalls Wilder with the chalkboard back in the day. And so there's a couple of different ways to think about this, and I think the most important way, if you're thinking all the way down to like sort of elementary school, there's a movement in Georgia called Deeper Learning, the Deeper Learning Network. And Deeper Learning is an instructional strategy that really can be tied to promoting career readiness. But what Deeper Learning does is it's really project-based problem-solving learning, right? And these strategies are designed to very open-ended, a lot of critical thinking skills. It really engenders teamwork, self-reflection, all of these things that were on the slide earlier to sort of how to AI-proof your career and the things that we need. And so while it's important to make sure that we are preparing the next generation workforce and thinking about supplying the high demand career initiative, everybody's not going to go into that, right? We can't have 1.4 million people going there, but thinking about the core knowledge, the core competencies that everybody needs, no matter if they're going to be a plumber or a nuclear physicist person, these are all the core competencies that we've talked about that we're getting in elementary schools, not only the fundamentals of reading and math, and for one, we need to think about changing how we think about math. Everyone can do math. But how do we teach these children with this sort of deeper learning mindset to unleash their creativity, their teamwork, all of these things? And then as you move into the upper grades, for those that show the aptitude and the interest, that exposure to what's available to them. Like, what is a STEM career? You hear that all the time, but what does that actually mean to a fifth grader, right? It's like, oh, I can program Mario Kart. I didn't know that was STEM or, whatever. But deeper learning, sort of lets students lean into what they're naturally interested in and using those models to really, connect the learning that they're doing with real world skills, real world applications that then expose them to all of these opportunities. And then if you're thinking about doing it on, we are, on this regional level, what are the regional job growth opportunities? Thinking about growing your own workforce, what kinds of partnerships, apprenticeships, internships, as students go through. Most kids who drop out of school, they do so because they're bored. All right, they don't see the relevance of why they're even there. Why do I have to know this? It's not going to do anything for me. And so taking this deeper learning mindset with, we know where the job growth is going to be, we know you can get good money careers, all of these kinds of things, rethinking how we think about school and approaching students, and might I add, training for teachers, because this is a different approach for them. Don't just tell them to do it differently. Like, what are the resources that are needed to retrain and help teachers have their own agency about how they're doing this with students who then have more agency in their learning? Like, all of these things are connected to get kids excited about these pathways that will be rolling, but that requires coordination, transparency. I always say we have such an embarrassment of riches in Georgia in terms of opportunities to enter and exit the workforce, but there's so many and it's so complicated. Most of the time I can't even figure out how, because I think, Irene, correct me if I'm wrong, you could go from a high school junior to a master welder owning your own business with all of the credentials and all of the money without paying a dime in post-secondary tuition. But I don't know how to do that because there's a bunch of different ways to do it. And so all of these departments and things coming together, we can't work in silos anymore. We have to think about the bigger picture and think about your particular piece as part of a bigger picture. And I think all of those changes are happening all at the same time, which is a lot, which is why we need to think about, okay, what's the common vision? Where's my role? How can I support this?
So very specifically to what you said, again, I hope that everybody leaves there today where you can really see very specific public policy that Governor Kemp is advancing, as well as the Georgia General Assembly is advancing too, that the cooperation between the Governor's office and the General Assembly over the last 2 years, really they're working together on this specific issue. A lot of it came out of Senate Resolution 175 that was a study committee. They call it the MAC caucus, Matt Dubnik and Matt Brass put forward, but you've already talked about Phoebe Putney Hospital, as well as the work that's happening down there with their college and career academy and trying to get people into the healthcare field. That came up, that's a direct need that started at a local level, then came up and said, we've got to change public policy as it relates to dual enrollment funding. And so that caused Senate Bill 86 as well as Senate Bill 440 and I'm so thankful you brought up accelerated career diploma, which is one of my favorite paths. I was in a meeting yesterday with Jones County College and Career Academy. They have 14 high school students because there's not enough room during the day to get a TCC in welding. Those students, 14, are showing up at 6:30 in the morning to get the TCC to graduate for accelerated career. And one of the huge benefits is that the employers in that region in Jones County are coming and seeing the work ethic of those students at 6:30 in the morning, high school students. And they are hiring them at the age of 17. Why is that important? All of our industries, especially in manufacturing, they have to be 18. They have to be 18. Can't let a 17-year-old. There are 2 kids that are hired at 17 right now. So industry is overcoming that issue that probably lawyers and risk managers are causing and going, I don't care what you say, this kid's coming in. And the example of, there's multiple examples of where strong CTAE programs and work-based learning programs are truly advancing this idea of getting students those skills. One other thing I want to bring up, again, very tangible things that you'll see that's an opportunity to support really counselors, is Governor Kemp's Georgia Match program. If I could see people in the audience, I would ask, how many people know about Georgia Match? I was with a group of CTSO student leaders, 50 CTSO student leaders. If y'all don't know what a CTSO is, Career Technical Student Organization, Skills USA, HOSA, DECA, great kids, 50 of them. How many people know that you have an individual graduation plan? 2 of the 50 held up their hand. How many of y'all know about Georgia Match? Just about everybody did. So that tells me that the influence that state leaders are making to help and support students as it relates to, I have a post-secondary option for me right here in Georgia. Chris led about how we need our population to stay in Georgia. There's no better way to do that, to make sure we're telling our high school students, we have a post-secondary opportunity for you. Go look at House Bill 192. Again, it's the governor's legislation. We are moving away from calling it the High Demand Career Initiative. Sorry, Governor Kemp launched that a number of years ago. Governor Kemp is turning that into the top state for talent. We're the top state for business. He wants us to be the top state for talent. That is the challenge of the strategy team and the very specific things. All of the things, Dana, you just discussed, or you go take a look at that. Our steward and his folks at the State Workforce Board are going to begin to look at this cross-agency alignment to see where are these programs articulated. We know what the SOC codes are. Let's back into CTAE for healthcare purposes, articulated into TCSG, then articulated into a 4-year degree. So we truly do. And one other piece, my friend Scott Lingrel is in the audience with the University System of Georgia. He is leading what we're calling navigation. We're really trying to determine how we support students' navigation all the way into these SOC codes. I mean, it's truly as simple as that. And if we have gaps, or we don't have credentials, or we don't have this, how do we do that? And communicate, again, responding to what you just said, how do we then communicate? None of this is going to be easy. It's not going to happen overnight, but we are moving with Governor Kemp's leadership in the right direction and making that happen. One other piece in House Bill 192 that I hope everybody in this room goes and takes a look at is that, again, that how many students in the room know that you have an individual graduation plan? Oh, I don't know. Again, I'm like, Chris, you talked about your own son didn't know he had an individual graduation plan. Well, that was something called the Bridge Bill. About anybody remember the Bridge Bill? House Member Fran Millar decided building resourceful individuals, and I forget what it's supposed to do, but we're building them. But that's turning into the top state for talent, and we are going into that requirement for the individual graduation plan, 6th grade through 12th grade, to start looking at how are we helping and navigating and talking about we need you to go into these high demand careers. And it's no longer going to be an individual graduation plan. It's turning into a college and career plan. And the other additions to the importance of a student starting in 8th grade with their college and career plan that is approved by their parents is we are adding not only logging in and setting up a Georgia Futures account in 9th grade. Y'all, that's huge. A Georgia Futures account, knowing where the finances are coming from, where you get Hope Scholarship, how you figure out this FAFSA thing that I sure can't tell you what FAFSA stands for. And then how do you do that? And the bigger thing about a Georgia Futures account, it is a tool that the state of Georgia, Georgia Student Finance Commission, can directly communicate not only with students, but also parents. The other piece that Governor Kemp is adding is Georgia Match. That truly is, and again, SREB leadership helping this 2 years ago, that truly can become a transformative tool of making sure every single high school student realizes there is a post-secondary path for me, and it's honestly right here, and I have automatic admission into these programs so that we are going to meet that 65% North Star.
Can I add on something? Okay, for all of y'all that missed my entire first answer, I now understand no one heard me, but it was good. Trust me, you can see the tape. Just to respond a little bit to what you're saying and bring this back to all of this great stuff that we're going for, which is fantastic. The impact on K-12 system and what needs to change there. As we roll some of this down into down to the 8th grade about these new pathways and stuff. And earlier in my talk, when I challenged all different ways that corporations in particular or just stakeholders can involve, that third level was full on, system champion and state advocate. And so if you want to make sure that the students in your community that are future workforce of yours, we need to be talking to our state legislatures about the ratio of high school guidance counselors. And it's not good right now. It's not where it needs to be. I think it's 1 to every 450. I know we have a guidance counselor in here. That's double what the national recommendation is. And also, I can barely keep track of my own 2 children, much less if I had to keep track of even the national standard of 250. What we're asking about with all of this guidance and thinking about all of these different opportunities and the school systems, the K-12 systems themselves, being resourced enough to understand themselves the different options. Like, because you can go straight to college, you could go straight to technical school, you could go straight into a career, an apprenticeship program, an internship program. Again, embarrassment of opportunity that we have. But what kind of guidance are we giving to, and what kind of ability do we have to even provide guidance? And so thinking a little bit outside the box for your own advocacy and engagement efforts is we need more guidance counselor really just focused on post-secondary pathway. A whole other side of that is the more traditional counselors, social workers, and whatnot to help the students with the mental health challenges. Right now, that's been combined into one because they both have the name counselor in them. And it's very 2 different jobs.
You overheard the conversation that Achieve Atlanta and I had outside in the hallway. And honestly, I think that is a continued policy, especially with the huge emphasis on school safety and mental health aspects of that. But I do believe that the General Assembly very much is taking a look at that. But to your point, everybody in this room can help be really good advocates around the importance of that. A lot of school districts are really trying to figure out unique ways to bring community leaders to the table to assist in doing that and using their waivers in order to, well, I might earn a counselor, but I mean, I know there's so many mentor programs that are out there, so there's a real role, but I think that's our challenge for community leaders in this room to really sit down with their schools as well as their districts to kind of where can we best fill in the gap. And then just because I see so many friends in the audience, and we have community leaders, I have to give a shout out to the PEACH, the Public Education Tax Credit. And for folks in this room that don't know about that, you can get a dollar for dollar tax credit to public education. And thanks to the Georgia Foundation for Public Education, they allowed school districts to be designated funds under that PEACH tax credit. And a huge number of our college and career academies have really stepped up to the plate so that industry leaders can know that their dollars in their region are going directly to the types of programs that they are supporting, where they can really put names to faces and see their tax dollars staying locally. So I hope if you're not giving to the public education tax credit, please go over there and see Paige and talk to her today, because that is critically important. But back to, again, the whole need for counseling. I think at the state level, we are truly trying to make sure we're maximizing the tools that we have in place today in order for that technology to support our counselors. And I'm sorry I don't have the clear data in front of me, but it's amazing to look at how Georgia Match, how many students got their letter, clicked on I'm interested in going to this technical college or this four-year college, and actually clicked and then went to the next thing and then got the text from the school saying, man, we're serious, we really want you, filled out the application, never talked to their counselor. And that data is alive and well as it relates to how Georgia Match really helped. I think that as we take a look at what's about to become the new college and career plan, we have the opportunity, especially with Georgia Student Finance, has great data. When we begin looking at, and again, I wish I had the data on this, but I want to say only 50 to 60% of our high school students have a Georgia Futures account. That's not good. I mean, we need to get that to 100%, because I guess people think, well, if I'm not going to college, I don't need a Georgia Futures account. But how are we going to get to 65% of our North Star, where you got to have post-secondary until we start really communicating around what college means? And you and I go back and forth about people, when you say college, they think 4 years, so you got to start saying post-secondary. And I mean, words mean things. So I do think that the ability, and I hope every school district takes advantage of the top state for talent and the new college and career plan and go, how can we take these tools and rebrand this? Every student needs the new shiny penny, right? Georgia Match is an amazing tool. Social media is coming out. We're investing in social media. We're pushing it. They get a great letter from Governor Kemp going, oh, wow, this is great. So let's now take this down to the local level and maximize on those resources. And I hope that happens.
So, with your two organizations, you have unique constituencies. What do you hear from key groups, whether it be students, teachers, district leaders, about the support or resources that they need most to be able to deliver more innovative and future-focused learning experiences?
I think for our group, and our stakeholders are frankly everybody that you mentioned on that list, because we're trying to pull everybody together, is that what the local districts need from their community is really for their community stakeholders, which includes business leaders, but also all the other community stakeholders, like what's their vision for the local school system? Like what do they need from their school system? A profile of a graduate, like what kind of skills, what kind of core competencies, like what's the purpose of your public education system and what are you looking for from it, right? And then partner with them to figure out how to get there and really think about the challenges and the opportunities. As I think what the pandemic really showed us is that the school system has been charged with now doing it all, but they are not resourced nor trained to do it all. And what I talk about is, we think about the whole child, like in terms of not only educating to a certain level, but transportation, nutrition, mental health, healthcare, like all of these things are now mostly accessible through the school in some way. And so thinking about what's this full service institution, how are they serving the community, and then how can the community serve them to get what they need to provide it. And so your example is so great that we are not going to have legislation that drops. This is okay. We're going to have even 1 to 250 guidance counselors anytime soon, much less lower. And so think about what are some alternatives to that. How can we rethink as a community, what does college and career counseling look like? Who can be part of that process? Who can support that? Who can scale that? And then sort of the purpose of state policy, the way I think about it, is in terms of like frameworks. And what kind of framework needs to be in place, like the Georgia Match program, to then allow communities to innovate and do whatever they need to do to get where they want to go, and then have state policy learn from that. So a great example that you mentioned is the partnership between Phoebe Putney and Albany Tech, where they were looking to grow their own nursing program, and Phoebe Putney made a huge multi-million-dollar investment in Albany Tech. But there was a barrier there in terms of state policy in the number of credits allowed with dual enrollment. So then they went to the state legislature and say, this particular policy is a barrier for us. How can we work together? State policy can also be used to help as we have these individual places of innovation, and there's a ton of great innovation going on in Georgia. Our problem is we don't know about each each other. And so how can state policy or state leaders or even corporate leaders who work across the state say, hey, that's a great model in Albany. How can we apply the elements of it to even a manufacturing plant in Vidalia or wherever, right? And so understanding how to replicate and scale, and then what kind of framework do we need to support that? But I think what our local leaders need is really a clear vision and understanding of, and an agreed upon one, about what is the purpose of education and what do we want from these, because we throw a lot at them, kind of rant, like, oh, by the way, do this too. Oh, don't forget about this. And it's not a coordinated vision. And so I think some clarity, some guidance, and then community support wraparound to help get the districts there, and then have the state leaders learn from and help support what's going on in the communities.
And let me give a big shout out to the Commodore Conyers College and Career Academy, known as the 4C Academy, that really was the bridge that brought Phoebe together with the technical college and industry leaders sitting around the governing board of that college and career academy. So that was a big piece of that collaboration that needs to be seen. And everybody here in this room knows that if they don't have a college and career academy, they do have a robust CTAE program. And every single CTAE program and or college and career academy has to have an industry advisory group. Go call up your CTAE and say, where's the industry advisory group? I want to sit down and start meeting with you. And hopefully, again, a lot of this policy at the state level around Top State for Talent will begin driving more and more of those opportunities. There's a million tools in that toolbox. You just have to find it and actually start using those tools. To answer your question about stakeholders, I'm going to speak to the role of the Governor's Office of Student Achievement. We have two stakeholders really, is serving the governor's education workforce strategy team, really trying to think through the data piece of that and assisting with alignment. The other new stakeholder is, again, the State Workforce Board. And if you go look at House Bill 192 at the very end, Governor Kemp is adding a little bit more work to your role, Stuart, in the State Workforce Board to truly be the organization. And why is it? Why does it need to be the State Workforce Board? Well, if it's at DOE, then it's not TCSG and USG. If it's at TCSG, well, that's not USG and DOE. So where is this independent, as well as where's the industry voice? Where is industry voice? Governor Kemp says it's at the State Workforce Board. So now all the strategy teams work very specifically around alignment. And the other big piece that we're going to be reporting to you, Stuart, and your team, and the board, is around return on investment. So how are we taking a look at, and we're going to have to take that targeted priority list, Stuart, that we're trying to create for you, and begin with, we can't do all of this, but how do we dive deep? And I promise you it's going to start with healthcare. How do we dive deep to assure that there truly is this alignment all over the state, and we really are analyzing where these supply and demand gaps are, and then where state do you need to continue to make investments? The state has already been trying to do this. You look at every single budget where these high demand or these high cost programs are out there, they're already trying to add money, but now it's time to make sure that we really are filling those gaps, and Governor Kemp's legislation is going to make sure that that's in place.
We have about 3 minutes left in the session. We want to give an opportunity for the audience to ask any questions. So we're going to bring up the lights here, and if you have a question for one of our two panelists, oh, I see several hands, we're going to allow you to ask. We got time for at least two, maybe three. So.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Kimberly Daniel, and you're speaking my language right now. I am all things CTAE. When I first started, I was with Georgia Department of Labor. I went to becoming a director of financial aid at a college, and then in 2008, I decided to go into the high schools because of what was coming to the college forced to come to the college and not prepared to come there. And so I was contributing to the student loan debt problem. So I've been in CTA since 2008 in the high school level. I started in South Carolina and came here. I was a former director at the College and Career Academy here. This is one of my former teachers as well. So you are speaking our language when you talk CTAE. I am really enthused about the change in policy. I think what I would love to hear more is how are we going to change the mindset about CTAE, because it's a big or between AP, honors, gifted, or CTAE. CTA is consistently the redhead stepchildren of the school. And although those kids are graduating at a higher rate that come through our programs, you have administrators who do not know the value of the CTAE programs in their own buildings because, again, there is this perception that that's all you could do. You're not prepared for college. I took a year off from leading and started up my own post-secondary support business. So I go in and I try to change those mindsets. So that's my biggest difficulty. I'm still in the school system now as a post-secondary coach. So everything that you're saying, I'm the first one in DeKalb County inside that school system. So how do we work together? Because I'm a victim of it as well. I preached college to my own 5 children, and they all went off. I have 3 that should have gone to a technical school or through an apprenticeship program. What are we doing to make sure the policy is coming down so that it also rebrands CTAE, skilled trades, and all of that?
I think the first step, to your point, is in the messaging and how we all talk about it, and that you mentioned sort of, honors, gifted, or CTAE. I think that needs to be honors, gifted, and CTAE. And as we think about redoing education in K-12, and we do sort of separate out the gifted kids in their own pipeline and things like that, like how can we infuse gifted programming into the CTAE program? How can we infuse AP classes into CTAE where they are appropriate? Like, I think to keep them completely separate does a disservice, frankly, to all 3 of them. And so we're re-envisioning and bringing up the prestige factor, if you will, about these programs, and then being very transparent about the opportunities coming out of them. Again, the engagement of the kids, and they can make good money early and all of these other things. And then it is a fight with the parents, who I talk to a lot of, Rotaries and local Chamber of Commerce business leaders who are all like, oh yes, definitely the CTA pathway, but my kid's going to UGA, right? And so we need to start changing those conversations as well. So a lot of it's a messaging strategy, but also how we deliver these programs and make it clear the high standards and the challenging curriculum that they are.
Thank you for that. I apologize. I know we had other questions, but we got our next panel ready to come up on stage. They're lined up. So we're going to stick around. We'll be in the area, so maybe at lunch you can grab us. We'll be glad to answer any of your questions, but that was a great one on that. And stay tuned. SREB and the College Board are working on how AP and CTAE can come together. So, but thank our panelists today, and thank you all for the good questions.